Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this recorded interview with Professor Luke O'Neill from TCD. My name is Fang Zhe, and I am the host tonight. So Professor O'Neill should have already been a familiar face to many of you since he is a frequent guest speaker on television and radio programs, engaging the general public on scientific topics, especially on COVID and vaccine-related topics recently. But for those who haven't got the chance to meet him yet, Professor Luke O'Neill is a world-renowned immunologist and chair of biochemistry at Trinity College Dublin. And Professor O'Neill has been a passionate science communicator dedicated to help the public finding the right information, which is also part of our topics here tonight. And one of his most recent book, which I admired very much after reading it, is Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Science. Forgive my language there. So yeah, in this interview, Professor Neil would discuss his view on the themes of what can we learn from the pandemic and how shall we reconnect. Okay, thank you, Professor. If you don't mind, I'll just start away with the questions.
Yeah, that's fine,
yes. Okay. So how do you think could developing countries could cooperate better to immunize the global population against COVID and against other infectious disease in the future?
Well, it's so important, Fenja. I mean, we need to get the vaccine out to all the countries of the world, really. And as you know, there's organizations like COVAX. They're doing a tremendous job. They've raised a huge amount of finance from countries like the US and the UK, for example. Philanthropy, they're buying up loads and loads of vaccine supply, of course, which is really important too. So I guess it's a mission to get the vaccine out as widely and as quickly as we can. And of course, the vaccine manufacturers are very much involved as well. AstraZeneca, for instance, have said they will make the vaccine available. I know a couple of the Chinese vaccines and even Sputnik V.
Yeah.
So in other words, all the companies are very well aware of this. And I guess from the countries themselves, they've got to be ready, haven't they? They've got to make sure they have the capacity now to allow the vaccination campaigns to get underway. And Ghana, of course, have got their first, it looks like their first delivery of COVAX supplies last week. So it's moving in the right direction.
So do you think that the richer countries actually stocking up too many vaccines, or they should actually share more with the poorer countries?
For definite, because I mean, there's two things going on here. There's a moral requirement to provide the vaccine, but also we want to stop variants emerging. And if the vaccine is still spreading in a country that's unvaccinated, that may come back to the more rich countries, you see. So it really is a global effort, and we must never forget that this should be a global effort overall.
Yeah. So Ireland, do you think would be acting as just as part of the EU, or should it have its own initiative in doing more? Because we don't actually hear much about how Ireland has played a role in the COVAX program.
We don't. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think at the moment in Ireland there's a bit of an emergency because we haven't got enough vaccine for ourselves, and it's quite controversial. This morning, the Taoiseach actually said he's disappointed with the supply. So it's a difficult topic right now, I would think, because mission one, of course, is for Ireland to vaccinate all the older people and the vulnerable groups, and that's what they're doing, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, the question might become, if we've done that, do we then wait and give vaccine away to vaccinate vulnerable older people in other countries, you see, and then maybe vaccinate the young people last of all, you know. That'll be a debate, I suspect, that will come up more and more. But you're quite right, though. There isn't much discussion about Ireland participating in COVAX, for instance, and maybe they should participate more.
Yeah, well, I hope to hear about more. Well, but suppose that everything goes all right, then we are all immunized against COVID. Do you think will our lives be the same again after this? Like, will there be concerns about reinfections after vaccination or significant mutations in the virus that defy the vaccine?
I think everybody's hurting. I mean, people are feeling beaten up by this virus, basically, you know?
Yeah.
So we're going to see a cautious approach into the future. And even if we begin to reopen our society, many will still be very cautious because they'll worry about, you know, getting infected or infecting other people. So it will be a process, I think, that will take a good few months. And I do think there will be long-term consequences. So it won't be unusual to see people wearing masks every winter in Ireland, for example. As happens in Asian countries, as you know. So in other words, that'll be a feature of our lives as well. And then, of course, we've got to make sure that we get ready just in case another pandemic emerges. And that means investment in public health, for example, so that we should see an increased investment in those kinds of things as well. So we will see changes, I think, in the future.
Yeah. So we keep our social distance for a long time, and we
Well, that'll be
won't.
hard. I think that goes against our nature, doesn't it? So it's very
Yeah.
hard to see that.
Well.
I think
Yeah.
once the vaccination campaign is extensive, then we can begin to go back together again. And this, I mean, in fact, the CDC this morning,
Yeah.
or last night, announced they're going to, allow for people to mix and mingle with no social distancing if
Okay.
both have been vaccinated. You see, so we'll head back.
Oh.
We'll head in that direction ourselves, I think.
Yeah. So you think the risk of significant mutations which could defeat the vaccination would be quite low at the moment?
Well, it's an unknown. I'd say
It's an
that much. It
unknown.
is a concern
Okay.
for definite, and we know
Yeah.
certain variants have cropped up. One or two look troublesome.
Yeah.
Now it's a work in progress. In fact,
Sure.
literally yesterday there was a good publication showing that the vaccines might work against the Brazilian and South African variants. You see, so
Okay.
so again, it's something to keep an eye
Yeah.
on. What we don't
Yeah.
want is a new variant emerging that really does dodge the vaccine.
Yeah.
That could be called SARS-CoV-3. We're back to square one then. So
Fingers
so
crossed.
well, we got to keep we can keep an eye on this. We can monitor
Yeah.
this very
Yeah.
closely.
Yeah.
So we will
Yeah.
have a period of close monitoring
Yeah. Yeah.
of the possibility of other SARS viruses emerging
Yeah.
from COVID-2. And
Yeah.
it's something we can do. We have the science to do that, you see. So it'll be a very
Yes.
important part of our future. I think
Yeah.
to keep an eye on these things.
Yeah, I think after the SARS crisis in Asia a couple of years ago, like a lot of the Asian governments have already, established like the coping mechanisms
Yeah.
to respond this fast. Do you think like after this, Europe would be much more ready and much more responsive to the sort of pandemic
You, you,
threatening?
you,
Yeah.
You'd hope so. I mean, you're right though. Like, look how South Korea performed.
Mm,
They did tremendously well against this virus because they were ready for it because of SARS. You see, so
mm,
so again, I think we would have learned our lesson from this phase, obviously, and let's hope we do. It'll be a big mistake if we don't come out of this wiser. Let's put it that
yes.
way.
Yes.
It'll be
Yes.
a missed opportunity just in
Yeah.
case more pandemics come along. You think?
Yeah, that's a lot of lives that's cost in this. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think like in Europe, we tend to think that we live in a more globalized society than many other parts of the world. So that comes with a cost as well in terms of that, I guess, with the higher mobility and transmission of the virus will be easier. So, do you think after COVID, suppose will be soon after that? How shall we still live as a globalized society? Would a lot of the perspective change in terms of how we regard international travel,
Yeah.
how we regard international corporations, immigration services, even domestic flight? Like, what do you think about this?
I think it's the vaccine certificate will be essential here. So, and,
Mm,
and China, in fact, I think today announced they're issuing vaccine certificates, for example. The
mm,
EU won't be far behind. So you will have a vaccine certificate to allow you to travel. It'll be like the
yeah,
yellow fever vaccine, for
yeah,
instance. Many
yeah,
countries insist on yellow fever vaccination. So
yeah,
it'll be on your passport or some kind of mechanism anyway to show you've been vaccinated. That would
yeah,
allow for international travel to come back.
yeah,
But we'll be cautious. Watch. We will have all the mask wearing and measures in place. They may
yeah.
restrict numbers a bit initially, but I can see us moving back towards travel as it used to be with vaccine certificates.
Yeah. So do you think we'll be carrying a little yellow book from
We
now
will.
on more and more with all the stamps that are saying that we're vaccinated?
We will indeed. And we'll
Yeah.
also be observing various measures to make sure we don't spread the virus anymore, but I
Okay.
think that's a
Yeah.
real prospect, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So do you think we can prepare ourselves like as individuals? We're not talking about government where they set up the centers and vaccine schemes, but as individuals, how can we prepare ourselves better for the future where similar infectious diseases or pandemic might be again looming in the horizon every 5 or 10 years, as some of
Yeah.
the scientists might predict?
I guess we got to, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it is a matter for policy to act if a new pandemic begins. It starts
Mm,
with that. But secondly, to get people prepared to wear the masks or adopt all these measures should a new pandemic
mm,
emerge. And that's what happened in places like Singapore and South Korea. They had their masks in their cupboards already, you see, so they were ready to wear them.
mm,
There was no hesitation. So we
mm.
need to have that kind of frame of mind, I think, in every country now because of the
Mm.
risk of another pandemic emerging.
So you mean that at the individual level, where just some simple things we do: wear a mask, adhere to hand hygiene, and keep unnecessary social interaction to the minimum.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well,
Yeah.
We don't know what the next pandemic might. It may not be a coronavirus. Remember, I mean, we thought it
Right.
was going to be a flu virus anyway.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was the projection, you see.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there are differences between these viruses. So we don't think now this is spread by surfaces, for example.
Hmm.
And that means hand hygiene is less important, it turns out, for COVID. It's
Sure.
more important for flu because that's inclined to be picked up off surfaces. So
Sure.
we may see guidelines around coronavirus avoidance
Yeah.
getting a bit clearer as well.
Yeah. So, given your wide interest in a lot of scientific topics, do you think, as individuals, we could be more responsible, or we could be more looking after environment as well? Because after all, it seems to be an invasion into a lot of the habitats of wildlife that initially trigger the spread of some new variants of virus.
I think so. I think we've got to be very aware of where this pandemic began. It probably began because we invaded animal territories and the bats were in that territory and infected us, you see. I think the
Mm,
other part to say is climate change can actually promote pandemics
mm,
because certain infections can persist in different temperatures and so on. So
sure.
we will probably see a coming together of fear, or at least what's the word, sort of the challenge of climate change will clash into the challenge of a new pandemic. So I think what's
Yes.
very important for individuals, as you say, is people need to be aware of this. You know, they need to get themselves ready, I suppose, for these things, and then change their behavior
Yeah.
accordingly to avoid these things emerging.
Yeah, that's a very good lesson, I guess we might have learned from this pandemic. So finally, a very maybe a practical question that was put through me to you. If there are multiple types of vaccines available in the future on the Irish market, say we can choose from them, uh, can a person actually choose from them firstly? Or if yes, how can we select between them, or are they
Yeah,
just basically the same?
I think initially, no, they're all the same because they all
Mm,
give 100% protection, remember,
mm,
against hospitalization and severe disease. So there's no need to
okay.
pick one over the other. That's the first thing in this phase of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, what might happen is that your marketing departments might say, "Oh, use my one instead of the other company." So
Yeah.
for example, Johnson and Johnson's a one-shot vaccine. That's more convenient, isn't it? So that may well begin to dominate. And if you
Yeah.
have a choice, you might say, "I'd prefer one shot over two because it's more convenient for me." It will become like other products. There will be choice,
Yeah.
and then consumers can decide which one to go for. I suspect that the guidelines will be just take whatever vaccine you're offered
Hmm.
because they will all give a similar level of protection anyway. So I wouldn't be too worried about thinking that one's better than this one. That's been happening, of course. People have worried about one
Yeah.
vaccine beating another, but the evidence would suggest they're all the same.
Okay. So it seems that you have a lot of confidence with, we are able to rebuild the society and reconnect with each other within a couple of months' time, given their schedule. So, and then we can learn from this actually and probably prepare us for
Yeah.
a better society for tomorrow. So yeah, that's a wonderful learning experience from you, Professor Neil. Do you think you can summarize a few things for us, maybe from your own view about the pandemic and the effects it has on the society? Like, what is the most important thing that you would like to remind us of, from this
Yeah.
kind of pandemic? Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, science has beaten this virus. That's really important to say.
Hmm.
This is the biggest scientific achievement in 100 years or more.
Hmm.
So within like 11 months, say, we got to having like 9 vaccines that are highly efficacious against this virus. That's pure science. It was based on immunology, vaccinology, biomedical sciences. So it's a great example of science delivering is the first thing I would say about that. And then the second thing I would say, we have to work together. We know this is a global problem.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that we'll see globalization here. And the WHO, of course, are
Hmm.
front and center in this regard. But
Hmm.
let's see more evidence that we're prepared to work together. All the countries of the world can join and help beat this virus together. I hope that happens. And I think
Sure.
it then moves into other infectious diseases. And let's try
Yeah.
and beat those. If we can do it with this one, why
Yeah.
can't we beat malaria or TB or these other
Sure.
diseases? So I think
Sure.
it's a good moment for us in a sense
Yeah.
to be thinking about the future together, and maybe we'll learn from COVID-19 and
Yeah.
we'll use that knowledge then to help with other diseases globally.
Yeah. So you think that we should actually use this chance to solve some of the more
Yeah,
deeper structural problems with the global community, So yeah, I think that's a very good lesson that we will
For
take
sure.
from
And of course,
the
what this
pandemic.
virus has done, this virus has really shone a light on inequality, remember, because
Sure.
the lower socioeconomic people suffer the most.
Yeah.
Certain ethnic groups have suffered, you know. So
Yes.
that's a bit scandalous. So now we
Yes.
get more evidence, if you like, how
Yeah.
unequal our society is.
Yeah.
So let's hope we learn from that and make things better for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't really antagonize society furthermore, because there are early signs that, some society, because of the recessing economy,
Yeah.
because everything, so people become antagonized or extremized, to some extent. So, but let's leave it there. And thank you very much, Professor O'Neill. This is a wonderful interview that you've done here.